Honorable Premier of Montserrat, Mr. Reuben T. Meade, and this is a podcast that, as I say, it's about conversations, not confrontations, and not just purely interviews. We kind of go 50-50 on that. So I think it's fair for me to say, Mr. Meade, as the old saying goes, you have hit the ground running, or should I say flying. You've clearly racked up a lot of air miles, and I would suspect some jet lag to go along with it, and a lot of meetings as well. So you've attended the COP29 meeting, you've attended the JMC, you've had meetings with the diaspora groups here in the UK. And I want to start on that last bit and some other issues we can deal with later on. You organized a meeting with diaspora representative groups in the UK. Give us the background to that, how it came about, and what are you now expecting from those representative organizations that attended that meeting?
One of the things that happens is that when a minister of government or the premier comes here, you're expected to meet with a grouping. So let's say, for example, you meet with Preston and Leicester. You can't meet with anybody else because you really don't have the bandwidth to do that. So one of the things which we're looking at is, let us get the Montserrat associations more organized. So the meeting should have really been with the heads of the various associations plus one, where they speak with us, they get the information, we get information back from them, and then they can go back to their constituencies to share that information. It's much more efficient that way. It's the first of its kind. It's a new approach to doing business. There are a few things that we've looked at. One of them is to build on that association so that you have true representation. The unfortunate thing is that most of the out-of-London groups did not participate. I think only the Preston group was present.
There was somebody from Birmingham, I think.
Okay. One of the things, and we go one at a time, let us create a database of Montserratians, and Montserratians by definition is in the Constitution, who have certain skills, expertise, part of industry, where you need to have somebody come to Montserrat to do something. You can just simply say, this is the Montserrat office. I need to find a broadcaster. So therefore, you go out and find me a broadcaster who may be available. And we plan to do the same thing with the U.S. associations.
Great.
And then bringing that data set into one central pool. Of course, we have to deal with data privacy issues and so forth, but that is something the young technical people are fully aware of and will handle. The second and very important element was the discussion of having a trust fund started here in the UK, and we're also looking at starting one in the United States, where we will be able to pool our resources to make investments in Montserrat, meaningful investments in Montserrat. So those are the two critical issues which we need to do. Other than that, we had the general discussions on what was happening in Montserrat, etc., and the conversations back and forth, sharing ideas. But it was, in my view, a very fruitful discussion. But as I said at the beginning, the disappointment is that I don't think we had a sufficiency of representation across all of the Montserrat associations.
I would suspect that that sufficiency of representation would come in follow-up meetings, because that link with the diaspora that has been spoken so much about, you have now appointed Mr. Quinston Buffon to be responsible for diaspora affairs. So I suspect that that follow-up would come via that route?
Well, the follow-up will come from Quinston as the parliamentary secretary with responsibility for diaspora affairs. So he will have a lot more time to deal with developments of that nature. That does not preclude any other minister coming to the UK, meeting with the representative group.
And you spoke about this not being limited to the UK. How do we then engage the other diasporas, the UK, Canada, the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, for example?
Well, in like manner, when Mr. Buffon goes across the United States, he will then plan with enough lead time to allow the presidents plus one to attend in a single location. Either he chooses the location based on where he's going or where he's invited to, or the American groupings among themselves choose the location. Whichever location is convenient. In Canada, you have principally three groupings: Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa. And it's relatively easy to meet in one of those cities.
This is giving additional recognition to the diaspora. And I've been hearing so much talk about how much of an asset the diaspora is to Montserrat, but we never seem to quite adequately tap into it. Is this now a new approach that is going to bring some fulfillment to that?
Yeah, indeed, it's a new approach. We must not look at our Montserratians overseas as just persons to whom we ask for money. So we need to raise money for something. We ask them, could you make donations here? Could you give us some wheelchairs? Could you give us some books and so forth? No, we need to go beyond that. Pooling resources of the 40-odd thousand Montserratians which we have out there. Some Montserratians up here are high net worth. Some in the US and Canada are high net worth. They may be able to contribute significantly more into a trust fund. And the fact that the trust fund is not a gift nor a grant, it is their money which is earning interest, while at the same time being used for developmental purposes in Montserrat. And once we can get that up and running, and we expect them to manage the trust fund, government should not be part of that trust fund arrangement. As I said to the youngsters last night at Whitehall, who visited Whitehall, you have enough lawyers and financiers up here. The same thing in the US, you have enough lawyers and financiers up there. So set it up within the framework of your own country. And if it is not possible to do that, then set it up in the framework of Montserrat. Because, there, in terms of the laws, you may not be able to have a trust fund where the money is going to be used elsewhere and so forth and so on. But that's for the lawyers to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally very happy to hear that, because back in 2017, I was part of a discussion, and that idea actually came up. I think it was referred to, then I did something on it called a sovereign fund, but something that Montserratians can put money into a fund that could be invested and used for different purposes to the benefit of Montserrat.
That's the whole idea. It is, how do you use the resources that are available to you to the benefit of Montserrat? We talk a lot. So you come up, you meet with groups, you talk, they cuss, they say whatever they want to say, and you walk away. What have you really achieved? What we want to do is to be more professional. The next thing which we need to say to the associations, each of you must register as a formal charitable organization. And you may in fact be able to get funding from your national governments. Not the Montserrat governments, but the government here in the United Kingdom, in the US, through other philanthropic associations and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And in terms of further discussions pertaining to the diaspora, I know that the issue of pensions and people in the diaspora, considering, especially from the UK, returning to Montserrat and how that would impact their pensions. You've been having some discussions regarding that issue as part of the JMC sidelines. How has that gone?
Well, the discussions have been very fruitful. The new minister, has already started doing some work on it and assigning persons to go and speak with Department of Works and Pensions to see how they can work it out. It's also included in the communique. Okay? Most times you don't see anything of that nature in the communique. Montserrat insisted it be part of the communique so that it gets official recognition that this must remain an agenda item until we get it sorted out. So I think we're gaining some traction. One of the things I should have done, which I did not do, and I'll put my hand up and say my fault, how many pensioners do we have in Montserrat from the UK? Because that's part of the data set which they require when they're doing their numbers to see the impact by indexing the pensions of whatever numbers are in Montserrat can have on their overall system. I can assure you they wouldn't even notice.
Would that, as it was discussed within the under the umbrella of the JMC, would that also impact the other overseas territories? Is this a Montserrat initiative that has a wider scope possibly?
When I argue at JMC, I'm representing all of the overseas territories. We support one another on the UKOTA, United Kingdom Overseas Territories Association. If there is an issue affecting one, it affects us all. So Montserrat, yes, would have raised it, but wherever it impacts any of the overseas territories, they too will benefit.
What else has come out of the JMC in particular that you could sort of disclose to us that would be of benefit to Montserrat?
Let me put it in a kind of way to give an indication of the movement that has taken place. I think that's important. Because I've been involved in JMC or in its various forms, and I've been around before the JMC. But we're always called family. And my position was I did not feel like family. You invite us up, you take our pictures, and you show us off. And then you tap us on our heads and say, good boys, go back home. I refused to take a photograph with the minister and the group. The minister came and got me.
I was about to say I did see you in a picture. Yeah, so that's how that came about.
The minister came and got me. And as I said to him, I respected him just having a 15-minute conversation pre-dinner the night before. And he has assured me, and I think coming out of the meeting based on the assurances that he gave throughout the JMC, that we can be assured that they will provide the assistance which we need, if at all they can provide it. We have spoken about aid. Montserrat is due to be graduated, and we've put forward a case for ourselves and the other ODA or ODA or grant countries for them to reflect on different ways of determining when a country should be graduated.
Okay. Expand on graduated for us.
It means that you're no longer qualifying for official development assistance. So you would get monies from FCDO. We're now no longer qualifying for money from FCDO. Our money will now be coming from the Treasury. We're still going to get the money, but it's the way you get the money from. And the terms of the grant would be different as well. The justification would have to be more robust, and the management of those funds also will have to be more robust.
Another issue that's been on the agenda pertaining to Montserrat, and I would suspect the JMC, has been this issue of asylum seekers making their way into the UK, and whether or not asylum seekers who are serving a prison term outside the UK could or would or are being sent to Montserrat.
No, I think we should not put it in that context. They have an issue with Diego Garcia. It is difficult for them to bring them into the United Kingdom because once they get into the United Kingdom, they're trapped in the United Kingdom system. They have asked us if we can host 3 prisoners. And we have consented. Apparently, there was a discussion with the previous premier, and he said yes. Because he had said yes, it would not be right for us to say no. And our position is, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So what is it? What is in it for Montserrat? I can't disclose that. But what I can assure you is that those prisoners, once they have served their sentences, they will have to leave Montserrat. And that's an assurance which I have asked them for in writing.
Not only have you attended the JMC meetings in London and had other meetings in London, you also attended the United Nations Climate Conference in Azerbaijan. And there's been a big discussion, even as we are speaking, about how the developed countries, or how much the developed countries should be putting into supporting the developing countries. What I'm interested in, how does Montserrat and the other overseas territories fit into this, given that we come under the umbrella of one of the developed countries, one of the leading developed countries, being required to fund the climate support system for the developing countries of Montserrat is like neither fish nor fowl in this case.
Well, let's not just say Montserrat, let's say the overseas territories. The overseas territories as a group, we have made representation for financing coming out of the climate fund to be allocated to the overseas territories, not as loans, but as grants. And I think we have gotten some serious traction on that. In the case of Montserrat specifically, you know that geothermal, I would have to argue for geothermal because that is one of the key considerations when it comes to climate change and green energy. I can say that they are looking at it favorably, and that's as much as I will go and say. We still have some work to do because we need to run some numbers, we need to provide the data, we need to supply a business case. So once we get back on island, then we'll start work on preparing the business case to submit to them.
Okay. I would suspect that a lot of detail on a lot of things would come out once you are back in Montserrat, because I'm speaking with you in the UK. However, there are two key issues that have been on the agenda. What can you tell us up to this point regarding the access issue, starting with that one?
It seems as though the access issue was not as difficult to resolve as it was made out to be, as it relates to sea access. And I think we've had some traction on that. And there's some paperwork to be done, and I'm hoping that the paperwork could be done before the end of next week.
And that's sea access regarding air access?
That's sea access. In terms of air access, we were not in a position to make much movement on air access because the main ASSI personnel were in the Caribbean while we were up here.
Yeah, I understand there was an ASSI group in Montserrat, or is...
The main ASSI grouping were in the Caribbean while we were up here. Anguilla is doing something on the airport, so they had to go to Anguilla. They may have gone into Montserrat to look at night landing capabilities in Montserrat, especially for Medivacs. But our position is, let's go beyond the Medivacs and look at night landing possibilities. As it relates to Twin Otters coming into Montserrat, Twin Otters can in fact come into Montserrat fully laden. They're not in a position to leave fully laden. But remember, let's say during Christmas period, most persons are coming in within a tight time period, within a week or two when the bulk of persons are coming in. But when they're leaving over a 1 month or 2 month period. So you have some bandwidth there to play with, although your numbers are going to be smaller. But because the numbers which the airplanes are permitted to take out, government will then have to subsidize those empty seats.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There are some other issues that again, when you go back to Montserrat, you will no doubt deal with them that are occupying your mind at the moment. The electricity supply system is one of them. What's going on or not going on with the port project and all of those things that were campaign issues.
Now, the things like port project, hospital project, those are domestic management issues. There's nothing to do with FCDO at this particular point in time. Because previous governments have had a hands-off approach to major projects, they end up in problems and government really doesn't know. We have changed the system so that the reporting comes to us at cabinet level, where we will know from period to period what's happening. If there's a variation to be made above a certain figure, and that figure has not yet been determined, it has to come back to the management group, which is a cabinet group minus the governor. One cannot manage a project, especially a multi-million dollar project, without having some oversight of it. And what we're assuring the British government, which we did, is that we will ensure that all projects will be monitored, the monies will be spent on time, and as far as possible within budget.
Okay, thank you. And finally for me on this, we know that the minister responsible for agriculture, trade, etc., Mr. John Osborne, has also been in the UK having discussions with concerning the UK Caribbean Investment Forum. Not wanting to get into his portfolio, but an overview, how are things looking there from what's being reported back to you?
Well, that's not his portfolio, actually. That's a portfolio that resides in the office of the Premier.
Oh, okay.
However, part of the understanding which we have is that we have to train up and expose the youngsters to take over. And this was part of such a training exercise and an exercise. His attendance went exceptionally well in terms of how he was received, in spite of the fact that you had participants from across the Caribbean, not dependent Caribbean, but across the Caribbean. Although the JMC concluded yesterday or last night, we had meetings all day today, starting from 8 o'clock.
And I'm talking here, we're speaking today, Friday.
Today, Friday. So John and I have been in meetings since 8 o'clock this morning until after 5 o'clock. Meeting with various private sector organizations and groups, getting proposals from them. And what we're going to cap it off with is that we will be having an investment forum in Montserrat in February of 2025, where most of these potential investors will be attending and visiting Montserrat. So that's a first for Montserrat, where you're bringing in a full British group of investors, of possible investors. And it ranges from building with steel fabrication suppliers, shipping, hospital, port, hotel development, across the full spectrum. And that is something that has come out of the meeting which Minister Osborne attended. One of the things I'll say in conclusion is this. The question is always being asked about the relationship of the governor and what is the role of the governor. And I can say that in all of our meetings, the governor has been exceedingly supportive, using her contacts as well to help us to overcome some of the challenges. So it's a relationship where we will be working very closely with one another, where government takes the lead, but she will assist us wherever she can find the resources to assist us.
Mr. Meade, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.